What happens when a royal guest walks onto one of the most watched morning shows in the entire country, sits down across from one of the most trusted faces on American television, and decides in less than a minute to make the entire thing about himself? It only took 32 seconds. 32 seconds of live television for a carefully planned interview to begin unraveling in front of millions of viewers who had no idea they were about to witness one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning TV history. This is not a story about shouting. It is not a story about chaos or raised voices. This is a story about tension, about entitlement, about silence, and about the exact moment when a room full of professionals realized something was very, very wrong. The cameras are already rolling. The Good Morning America studio is bathed in soft, golden light, the kind designed to feel warm and welcoming, even when the city outside is still shaking off the night. The temperature is perfectly controlled. Not too warm. Not too cold. Comfortable. Calm. Predictable. The way morning television is supposed to feel. Behind the scenes, producers watch their monitors with relaxed focus. This is routine. Another high-profile guest. Another sit-down. Another conversation that will glide smoothly into the next commercial break. And at the center of it all sits George Stephanopoulos. He's in his chair, posture easy but precise, papers neatly stacked, jacket buttoned just right. He wears that familiar expression millions of Americans recognize instantly. Calm. Steady. Approachable. The smile of a man who has been doing this long enough to know that nothing surprises him anymore. This is a man who has interviewed presidents, world leaders, people in the middle of scandals that shook entire nations. Nothing rattles George Stephanopoulos. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. The director's voice crackles softly through headsets. Stand by, and we're live in 5, 4, the music fades. Good morning, America. And then Prince Harry walks out. The applause is polite, measured, respectful. Not explosive but warm. The kind of applause reserved for someone important but not unfamiliar. Harry nods slightly as he approaches the chair opposite George. He smiles but it doesn't quite reach his eyes. George stands, extends his hand, and greets him the same way he greets every guest who sits across from him. Warm. Professional. Ickle. Prince Harry, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. The words are smooth, practiced, neutral. No weight behind them beyond courtesy. Harry sits. The chair shifts softly beneath him. He adjusts his jacket, crosses one leg over the other, leans forward just slightly. And before George can fully settle back into his seat, before the moment can breathe, Harry speaks. Well, I appreciate it too, he says, his tone calm but edged with something sharp. Although, honestly, I would have thought you'd be a little more prepared for this. It lands heavier than anyone expected. George blinks. Just once. Not the blink of confusion. Not surprise. A processing blink. The kind that happens when someone says something you didn't expect. Live, with cameras rolling. But George recovers instantly. His smile stays in place. His voice remains steady. I'm sorry, he says gently. Can you help me understand what you mean by that? There's a beat. Harry doesn't hesitate. I mean, he says, leaning in a little more, I would have expected a bit more. I don't know, reverence. I am a prince after all. There it is. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just spoken plainly, like a fact. The air changes. It's subtle but it's real. The kind of shift you don't notice unless you've been in rooms where power dynamics suddenly tilt. A producer behind the camera stiffens. A cameraman glances briefly at his monitor, then back at the set. At home, viewers pause mid-sip of coffee. George doesn't flinch. He doesn't laugh it off. He doesn't joke. He doesn't deflect. He nods once, slowly, acknowledging the statement without validating it. Well, absolutely, George says evenly. We're honored to have you here, and we want to make sure we cover everything you'd like to talk about today. It's a graceful pivot. A professional one. The kind meant to move the conversation forward and smooth over the bump. But Harry isn't done. He shifts in his chair. Crosses his arms. His jaw tightens just enough to be noticeable. You know, he says, most people who get to sit across from someone like me, they come a little more prepared. They know who they're talking to. This time the silence lasts longer. The studio audience doesn't react. No laughter. No murmurs. Just the faint hum of studio lights and the distant city outside. George remains still. His hands rest calmly on the desk. He's listening. Really listening. But there's something different now. This isn't a difficult guest. This isn't nerves. This is entitlement, spoken plainly, confidently on live television. George takes a breath. Prince Harry, he says, his tone unchanged, I want to assure you we've done our homework. We're really looking forward to this conversation. He pauses. So let me ask you this. George looks directly at him. Not challengingly. Not aggressively. Just present. What is it that you most want the American public to understand about you today? It's an open door. A gift, really. Most guests would rush through it. Share a story. Offer vulnerability. Say something human. Harry laughs. Not a big laugh. A short one. Sure. Dismissive. What I want people to understand, he says, is that I shouldn't have to sit here explaining myself to someone who doesn't even understand who I am. George doesn't react. No raised eyebrow. No tightened lips. With all due respect, George replies calmly, that's exactly why we're having this conversation. So the public can get to know you better. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Harry shakes his head. See that right there, he says, pointing lightly toward George. That's the problem. You're treating me like I'm just another guest. The words hang. I'm not just another guest. For a moment it feels like George might move on. Might redirect. Might save it. But something shifts in him too. He leans forward just slightly. Prince Harry, George says evenly, every single guest who sits in this chair gets the same treatment. That's what makes this show fair. His voice remains calm. And that's what makes it work. The words are gentle. But they're firm. Harry sits back. His arms uncross. His posture stiffens. And the look on his face says it all. This did not land the way he expected. The camera cuts to a wider shot. 2 men. 2 chairs. A desk between them. And an interview that is no longer an interview. Because now something else has entered the room. And it's not going anywhere. The tension doesn't explode. It settles. Heavy. Quiet. Watching. And as George waits for Harry's response, steady and composed, one thing becomes painfully clear to everyone watching. This conversation is no longer about stories, or understanding, or connection. It's about control. And in just 32 seconds, everything has already begun to fall apart. The silence after George's words doesn't break right away. It stretches. Not awkward. Not empty. Heavy. The kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes you aware of every tiny sound in the room. The faint buzz of studio lights. The soft hum of cameras adjusting focus. Somewhere offset, a producer shifts their weight. Prince Harry doesn't speak immediately. He sits there, staring at George Stephanopoulos, his jaw set tighter now, his lips pressed together like he's weighing something carefully. For the first time since he walked onto that stage, he doesn't look confident. He looks irritated. Like someone just told him no, and expected him to accept it. You know what? Harry finally says, uncrossing his legs and leaning back into the chair. I think the real issue here is that you're not used to someone like me. George doesn't interrupt. He lets him finish. Someone who actually has something real to say, Harry continues, his voice gaining edge. Someone who isn't afraid to speak up. A subtle shift ripples through the studio. At home, viewers lean forward without realizing it. This is no longer background television. This is the kind of moment you don't flip away from. George nods slowly, thoughtfully, as if he's genuinely considering the words. Actually, he says calmly, that's exactly what we love about this show. Guests who aren't afraid to speak up. That's why we invited you here. He leans forward just a touch, mirroring Harry's posture. So please, George adds, his voice open. Go ahead. Say what you've got to say. For a split second it looks like this might work. Harry pauses. His shoulders drop slightly. There's a flicker, brief, almost hopeful, like maybe he's about to step into the moment instead of fighting it. The room waits. Then he shakes his head. What I have to say, Harry begins, is that I'm tired of being told how to sit, how to talk, how to present myself. His voice tightens. And right now, sitting in this chair, I feel like I'm being controlled. That word lands wrong. Controlled. George's expression doesn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpens. Not anger. Clarity. Prince Harry, George replies evenly, nobody in this room is trying to control you. You're here because you chose to be here. He lets that sink in. And we're giving you a platform to say whatever is on your mind. Pause. That's a gift. The studio feels colder suddenly. Not in temperature, in energy. Harry shifts again, clearly uncomfortable now. He looks away briefly, scanning the room as if searching for agreement. There is none. The audience, both in the studio and at home, can feel it. The dynamic has changed. This is no longer a prince being challenged. This is a man being gently but firmly grounded in reality. Harry goes quiet. Seconds pass. George doesn't rush him. He doesn't fill the silence. He waits. Then Harry exhales, slow and deliberate. You want to know what the real problem is? He says. George nods once. Please. The real problem, Harry says, is that people like you, people on television, think you get to decide who matters and who doesn't. His eyes lock onto George now. And I'm telling you right now, I matter. I matter a lot. George listens. Truly listens. When he speaks, his voice is softer now, almost reassuring. Prince Harry, he says, of course you matter. Everyone matters. Harry's shoulders tense. But, George continues, the way this works is through conversation. A real conversation. He tilts his head slightly. And right now, I don't think we're quite there yet. George glances down at his notes, then back up. So let me try one more time. Another open door. Another chance. What made you decide to come on the show today? The question hangs in the air. Is generous, patient, almost forgiving. Harry stares at him. I came here, he says slowly, because I was told this would be a safe space. George nods. And it is. But right now, Harry adds, it doesn't feel safe. That's the moment. You can feel it ripple through the control room, through the studio, through living rooms across the country. Unsafe. George doesn't react defensively. He doesn't scoff. He inhales carefully, choosing his words with precision. Prince Harry, he says gently, I want you to know you are safe here. You have always been safe here. He gestures subtly to the room around them. Nobody in this room is your enemy. We're just here to talk. His tone is sincere, almost pleading now. And I genuinely hope we can do that. For a heartbeat, something changes in Harry's face. Not anger, uncertainty. But it doesn't last. You know what? Harry says, straightening in his seat. I think the problem is bigger than this room. George remains still. I think the problem is the entire system, Harry continues. And I don't think anyone here, including you, has any idea how hard my life actually is. George nods. And that, he says softly, is exactly what we want to talk about. He leans in again. Your life, your experience, your story. Pause. We want to hear it. The audience at home can feel the frustration building now, but not with George. They can see it. Plain as day. One man is offering connection. The other is refusing it. Harry looks down at his hands. Rubs his thumb against his fingers. Then finally speaks. I have never felt so watched in my entire life, he says. Every second. Every day. George smiles. A real smile, because finally, this is it. That sounds incredibly difficult, George says gently. And I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling even if, no, Harry cuts in sharply. They can't. George stops. No one can relate to this, Harry continues. This is unique. No one else on this planet goes through what I go through. The smile fades from George's face, replaced by thoughtful understanding. You may be right, he says. And that's exactly why people want to hear from you. Harry shakes his head again. If people really cared, he says, they'd already understand. I shouldn't have to explain it. George leans forward, voice calm but firm. I think moments like this are powerful precisely because you can help people understand. A long pause. The tension is back. Thicker now. Heavier. Harry looks up slowly. You know what? He says quietly. I don't think I should have to teach people how to treat a prince. The words echo. And if the world can't figure that out on its own, he adds, maybe the world has a bigger problem than I thought. The studio freezes. George doesn't speak right away. When he does, his voice is steady, but unmistakably grounded. Prince Harry, he says, I think we might be looking at this differently. A beat. But that's okay. That's what conversation is for. Harry stares at him. And then, something changes. His hands grip the arms of the chair. He shifts forward. The cameras tighten their frame. And slowly, deliberately, Prince Harry begins to stand. George looks up. Prince Harry, he says quickly but calmly, we don't have to be done. We have time. Harry straightens fully now. I was told this would be respectful, he says loudly enough for the room to hear. He steps away from the chair. This has been anything but. George remains seated. I hope you know, George says, his voice unwavering, we've shown you nothing but respect from the moment you walked in. Harry stops, turns, looks back at him. And for one fleeting second, something flickers across his face. Recognition. Then it's gone. He turns and walks off the set. The room is silent. The cameras are still rolling. And George Stephanopoulos sits there alone, looking straight into the lens, waiting. Because this moment isn't over yet. The studio doesn't move. Prince Harry is gone, his footsteps swallowed by the hallway beyond the cameras, but the weight of his presence lingers like a shadow that refuses to lift. No applause follows him. No gasps. No whispers. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that only exists when something real has just happened. George Stephanopoulos remains seated. His hands are folded calmly in his lap. His shoulders are relaxed. His posture hasn't changed, not even an inch from the moment Prince Harry first sat down across from him. If you didn't know better, you might think this was exactly how the segment was supposed to go. But everyone knows it wasn't. The camera holds on George a fraction longer than usual. Somewhere in the control room, a producer hesitates, waiting for instruction. Cut to commercial? Fill the silence? Do something. George doesn't rush them. He looks directly into the camera lens, into millions of living rooms across the country, and offers a small, gentle smile. Not sarcastic. Not forced. Just human. Well, he says softly, that was certainly something. His voice is calm. Almost conversational. As if what just happened wasn't one of the most uncomfortable walk-offs ever broadcast on morning television. And in that moment, the contrast becomes undeniable. Because one man stormed out. The other stayed. The studio slowly exhales. George adjusts the papers on the desk. Not because he needs them, but because it gives the moment structure again. Control. Normalcy. He glances briefly off camera, listening to direction in his earpiece, then nods almost imperceptibly. And then he keeps going. Because that's what professionals do. Because that's what class looks like. At home, viewers sit frozen on their couches. Coffee mugs untouched. Phones forgotten. Social media apps already lighting up with reactions, clips, hot takes, disbelief. But in the studio, George Stephanopoulos does not react to any of it. He doesn't explain. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't take a victory lap. He simply moves forward. And that restraint, that quiet refusal to make it about himself, says more than any argument ever could. Because when you strip everything else away, that's what this moment was really about. Not royalty. Not television. Not even disrespect. It was about how two people handle pressure. Prince Harry walked onto one of the biggest stages in American television carrying something heavy, resentment, frustration, maybe even anger. And instead of setting it down, instead of using the moment to connect, he carried it like a shield. Every question felt like an attack. Every neutral gesture felt like an insult. Every attempt at conversation felt, to him, like control. And George Stephanopoulos, a man who has spent decades navigating egos far larger than his own, met all of it with patience. Not weakness. Patience. He offered open doors. He offered space. He offered understanding. Again. And again. And again. And each time, Prince Harry turned away from it. That's what made the moment so powerful. Not because someone lost their temper, but because someone never did. The cameras never caught George raising his voice. Never caught him rolling his eyes. Never caught him trying to embarrass his guest. What they caught instead was something rarer. Restraint. Grace. The ability to stay exactly who you are, even when someone across from you is doing everything they can to pull you into chaos. And that's why this moment didn't end when Prince Harry walked off the set. It kept going. Because the audience didn't see a prince being mistreated. They saw a man being given every possible chance to speak, and choosing not to. They saw entitlement collide with professionalism. They saw what happens when someone expects reverence, and is met with equality instead. 32 seconds. That's all it took. 32 seconds from the moment Prince Harry sat down to the moment the tone shifted forever. 32 seconds for the mask to slip. 32 seconds for millions of people to realize that this interview was never going to be about stories or healing or understanding. It was about status. And George Stephanopoulos never bowed to it. When the segment finally cuts to commercial, the studio lights dim slightly. Crew members move quietly, careful not to break the mood. George remains seated for a moment longer, staring at the desk, thoughtful, composed. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't look smug. He looks steady. Like someone who knows exactly who he is, and doesn't need anyone else to confirm it. And that's the part people will remember. Not the walk-off. Not the accusations. But the way one man stayed grounded while the other unraveled. Because in the end, respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. Prince Harry walked into that studio expecting the world to bend. George Stephanopoulos stayed exactly where he was. And when it was over, when the camera stopped rolling and the noise of the internet exploded, one truth remained impossible to ignore. Grace is louder than entitlement. Calm is stronger than ego. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to lose your cool. That was the moment. That was the morning. And that was the interview that reminded millions of people what real class looks like. If this story made you stop, if it made you think, if it made you see this moment in a new way, make sure you like the video so more people can find it. Comment below and tell us whose side you were on. We read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic deep dives into the moments television never forgets. Because sometimes the quietest moments speak the loudest. And this one spoke volumes.